Dave. I'm just going to change some nice settings. Yeah, hopefully, for those of you that were in a breakout room with me and maybe couldn't hear me as well as you should, it should be better now because I found out my microphone wasn't on the setting that it should have been on, which would have been a problem for you all going through the preach now. And now the dog decides to bark, who's been quiet all morning. That's really good of him. I'll open with prayer. I think, yeah, Lord, I thank you that we're able to gather here this morning before you. And Lord, I pray that the words that I bring will be the words that you've given me to share this morning. And the vision that I outline will be your vision for us going forward into the rest of this year. Amen. So, yeah, I'm actually going to be talking about nativity, and that's probably not come as any surprise for the guys that are regularly part of King's Church Kendal, but for people that haven't been before, you probably think it's a little bit of a strange thing to be talking about in April, but hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer as we move on the reasons why. So 2019 marked a big step change really for us as a church, moving forward into new ground in the way that we reached out into the community around us. It's now been 16 months since we undertook what was a massive step for us as a church and brought the gospel of Jesus Christ to the ears of around 900 people over 3 days with our live nativity. You might remember in the autumn of 2019, there was a prophecy brought, which was all about stepping off the map as a church. Now, that could be interpreted as what we've had to go through this last year and a bit with COVID-19. That's certainly taken us off the map into uncharted territory, but it also has for every church across the land. Now, I firmly believe that the first real push for us as a church to sail off the map into new territory happened in December 2019, and we certainly did that. And the Live Nativity was an amazing event with probable eternal consequences for some of those who attended and had seeds sown into their lives. So now, after 16 months of reflection, where do we go from here? Do we continue to press on and walk off the map, or do we retreat to a position of comfort and safety? So before we look at where we're going in 2021, I want to give an overview of where we went in 2019. Now, hopefully I can screen share. Just bear with us a moment while I work on my settings. I think I'll have to get rid of that. Oh. And I might need help from Clayton here. There we go. Can we see that? We can. Okay. Hopefully that'll start rolling through. Hang on, I think it wants to. Oh, for some reason it's not, but it's okay. It doesn't matter, Clayton. I'll just click them through as we go. Yeah, so back in December 2018, a group of us went off down to a church at Caton, which is just outside Lancaster, which actually is pastored by a relation of mine. And we've taken animals there to a live nativity that they've done every other year over the course of a few years. And we experienced what they were doing down there and how they were outreaching to a large part of the community around them. And having come back and chatted that through, we really were struck that God was calling us to do something similar, that we could see the massive potential to outreach to a large amount of people. And we certainly had the facilities down here at the farm. We had a wide range of gifting within the people in the church, and we also saw it as a great opportunity to work together to strengthen the community within the church. Something that we'd not really done a lot of things together as church on a whole. There was lots of things going on in smaller groups, but the opportunity really to do something all as one was a great way of building us together. And it was also a good way of building people from our wider community into the church, people that us as individuals knew, but that didn't know other people amongst us. So we were really enthused by the prospect of all these things, and so we decided to give it a go. And we put on what would only be described as a huge undertaking, which was received amazingly, and it provided us really the springboard, did the actual production to really bring a strong gospel message. So it wasn't only the gospel message brought through the showing and production of the nativity, but we were able to actually do a short gospel preach afterwards, and we actually sowed seeds into, as I say, about 900 people, which we've never, in the life of King's Church Kendal, which began in 2005, I think in all the gospel outreach events that we've done, this one probably reached as many people as them all put together. So that was where we were. I'm going to have to find my notes again because I closed the Word document that I was coming off. So just give me a moment while I pick that back up, and let me get rid of that. Okay. It's very clunky, isn't it, doing screen sharing and all this online. It'd be a lot easier once we're back to in person. I can just press a little clicker and carry on talking without having to fiddle around with technology. Right, okay, I've got my notes back. So originally I was going to bring this preach in early March last year. It was all prepared and ready to go, and plans had been begun to undertake a live nativity again in the December of 2020. But tragically, a few days before I was due to bring this preach, we received the awful and sudden news of the passing of Tim Redding. And it wasn't appropriate then to bring that this preach that Sunday. Now, Tim grasped hold of the vision of the nativity completely. He was willing to get involved wherever he was needed. He secured gifts from 2 local builders merchants to supply all the materials for the stable construction and Bethlehem stalls. He helped with the construction. He was involved in the torchlight float in the September before. And who can forget him as a wise man in the actual nativity? And it really showed his dry humour perfectly. And he was an important part of the nativity, and I've no doubt that he would have put the same level of commitment into it again. We then bumped this nativity preach on another week, and I was going to bring it again the following Sunday, but at that stage we had lockdown looming and a huge amount of uncertainty. So it was put on pause for a month or two, and then obviously COVID went on and on, so we never actually got to the stage where it was going to be a chance to do a nativity last year. And although we still live in a time of huge uncertainty, it's important that we now begin to plan for the future. We believe that it's right to begin planning on doing another nativity this year, albeit quite differently to the one that we did in 2019, given the present circumstances. Now, I'll be looking at how and what it's going to look like a little bit later on. First, I want to actually talk about calling and what is our calling. Now, calling can be split into two parts. First, we're all called by Christ to follow him. The first half of Mark 1 verse 17 says, "Come, follow me." 2 Thessalonians 2, 13 to 14. But we ought always to thank God for you, brothers and sisters, loved by the Lord, because God chose you as first fruits to be saved through the sanctifying work of the Spirit and through belief in the truth. He called you to this through our gospel, that you might share in the glory of the Lord Jesus Christ. 1 Peter 1 verses 1 to 2. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, and struggling with words here, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ and sprinkled with his blood. Now, the second part of our calling is that we're all called to participate in God's calling of others. Back to the first verse that I brought, Mark 1 verses 17, and the second part of that, and I will send you out to fish for people. Matthew 28:19, Great Commission. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Mark 16:15. He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Acts 1 verse 8. But you will receive power when the Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, and to the ends of the earth. So everything else really fits into these two. First part, to follow him, to turn around from what we were, to live like him, to become Christ-like, to be part of his community, and to be in relationship with him. The second part, God calls us to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. When we launched the current preaching series that we're going through at the moment in January, I preached on living the life of love, a life like Jesus, loving God and loving people. We all have that calling to love like Jesus. For some, it may be into a very specific area, like becoming a missionary or planting a church, practically feeding the poor and needy by running or being involved in food bank, maybe putting on CAP courses for people that are struggling financially. But for most of us, God's calling is for us to be salt and light into the place where we are, being Christ-like in our daily lives. But collectively, as a church, God also calls us to reach out to those around us with the gospel. God called us as a church at the start of 2019 to step out and preach the gospel through the nativity to far more people than we've ever preached the gospel to before. Our calling to preach the gospel will never change. Our calling as a church to how, where, and when we preach the gospel may change over time, but certainly as I talk today, we believe again that our calling is to take the gospel to hundreds of people through the outreach of the nativity. We feel through much prayer and listening to God that it is the right time to do this again this year. So talents and gifts, excuse me a moment. Matthew 25 verses 14 to 30 is the in the NIV it's noted as now as the parable of the bags of gold, or more familiar, the parable of the talents. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who received 5 bags of gold went out at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you had not sown and gathering where you had not scattered seed. So I was afraid. I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I had not sown and gathered where I had not scattered seed. Well, you should have put your money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw the worthless servant outside into the darkness where there were weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, God gives us all gifts or talents. And in this passage, although Jesus refers to talents or the bags of gold really as being a monetary figure, if you take this passage in the context of chapters 24 and 25, it's clear that Jesus is referring to the gifts that God gives us. Every one of us, every one of you has been given gifts to use for God's glory, but never more than we can handle, each to our abilities. Very often, though, ones that will stretch us and ones that might take us out of our comfort zones. But God does not give us all the same gifts. He gives gifts that will vary greatly across the body of the church. God gives us gifts of time, gives gifts of resources, practical skills and abilities, spiritual gifts, etc. For us, Jane and I firmly believe that the facility that we have at the farm is a gift that God's given us to not only provide for us as a family, but more is really to be a gift to be used for his glory and bring glory to him. And it enables us to reach out to regular customers. And we have many opportunities over the years to be able to talk to customers who have really, you can tell when somebody's not quite the same as they usually are when you get to know people, and it gives us a chance to speak God's wisdom at times into their lives. It also gives us the opportunity to share our faith with our staff, many of whom I don't have any faith at all, many of whom have all kinds of things going on in their lives. And then more recently, through the Nativity, it's been a great resource that we've been able to use really through that. And we often think of gifts from God as being spiritual, but there's the whole range of practical and physical gifts that he's given us as well, that we can all use for his glory. And I can't speak for others, but I can speak for myself in terms of one of the gifts that God's given me, and is very practical. And I'm a very practical person, and I believe that God's made me that way. And I have a very good gift of being able to visualize something. So I know it frustrates the people around me when I say that, oh, we'll do this, and this, and they struggle to see what I'm trying to explain. But in my head, I can see perfectly really what it's going to outwork like, and it's really good to be able to have someone like that that can to be able to see what God's calling us to, but particularly it serves really on a practical level on the farm of being able to plan and build and construct and do those kind of things. But God's gifts to us will, sorry, I've lost my place. God gives us gifts not to be hidden away like the third servant, but gifts that are to be used. The first two servants, in using their talents, gained more. The first one was even given the talents of the third. Oh, it's very clear that God gives us gifts and expects us to use them for his glory. Now, what use is a gift if it's given to us, if we actually hide it away and never use it? So I'd encourage you all to explore the gifts that God has given you, and also to encourage others in gifts that you see in them. So last year, our gifts were very clearly used to display the gospel of Jesus. And this year, we can be confident of not only using those same gifts, but also many more besides. Our gifts used in isolation can display Christ in us and be a witness to all around. But when we put together the gifts that God has given us individually, it's like putting together 100 or so piece jigsaw. Each has its place. Each one is different, fulfilling a different role. But when we put each one into the right place, it can be something quite amazing. Almost every one of you was a piece of that nativity jigsaw last year, and it was a great success because each one of you used the gifts that God had given you individually to collectively reach far more people with the message of Jesus than we could ever hope to do if we used our gifts in isolation. Now, this year, the makeup of the jigsaw may look slightly different, and we're going to have to make some changes to who is available, who is going to be involved, and they will bring new gifts, and those gifts will be used and put together will be different. How we'll put those gifts together will be different. But if we are to see the impact and be able to bring the gospel to so many people again, then it's equally important that the gifts that God has given us individually are used together so that the light of Christ shines forth clearly and the gospel is presented to open hearts, just as it was last time. Now, preparing ground, the next parable is actually one of my favourite parables, probably because as a farmer I can relate very well to it, and that's Matthew 13, verses 3 to 9. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still others fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Now, much was said about planting of the seed in the run up to our last nativity and planting into well-prepared ground. And whilst I was preparing, I was struck by verse 8 about the seed falling on good ground. And as a farmer, I want to go out and plant my crops into well-prepared ground at the right time in the best conditions possible, as I know that that will get the crop off to the best possible start. The big difference between sowing now and in the time of Jesus is I can put every seed, particularly with the advent of GPS, I can put every seed exactly where I want to in the ground. In those days, to get full coverage of good ground, it was done very much by scattering out over a wide area, and some seed would end up in the weeds, some on the path, some on the rocks, but the vast majority would fall into good, well-prepared soil. Now, our intention when sowing the seed of the gospel should be to do our best to sow into well-prepared ground. We could easily bring the gospel to 900 people by going door to door or preaching in the street, and there may be times when that's the right thing to do. But that's a little bit like standing in the weeds or on the rocks and sowing with the hope that some falls onto prepared ground. It's preferable to stand in prepared ground when sowing seeds. If some falls into the weeds or onto the path or the rocks, then that's okay. But we know a large part of the seed is going into good, well-prepared ground. Let me be clear, however, we do not know the hearts of men. God prepares hearts and not us. We do not always know the ground that God has already prepared. So we should always be ready to sow when God prompts us. God prompted us the last time to sow seeds, and that he would use the nativity to prepare hearts. So do I, as a farmer, once I've planted a field, stop sowing and wait for a harvest? No, I keep on planting until all the fields are sown and the time for planting is over. But the reality is that there's so many unplanted fields or hearts out there that it's unlikely that we will ever stop planting. Do I plant and harvest in the same field at the same time? No, I don't. But I may harvest from a seed that was planted some time before. If I'm harvesting fruit from a tree, then the seed of that tree may have been planted by someone generations ago. We're called to go out and plant the seed of the gospel. In Mark 4:26-28, he also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows. He does not know how. All by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. God provides the conditions for that seed to grow. And I have no control over when that crop is going to be ready for harvest. I can't force that crop to grow quicker than it should. And harvest can't be measured at the point of sowing. Neither should we measure the success of the nativity because we've not seen a large harvest. Some seed that you plant in the spring and harvest it in the autumn. Very short time between planting and harvest. But some, like an acorn, takes years before it produces a harvest. And one thing that we can be sure of is that there'll never be a harvest unless seed is first sown, either by us or by someone else that's been faithful to God's calling some time before. We are promised in verse 8 a crop 30, 60, or 100 times what is sown. So the more seed that can be sown, the greater the harvest will be. So let's keep on sowing. Now, we may have the privilege of seeing the harvest, or it may be that we're sowing acorns that take years to mature, but grow into mighty oaks. Now, the prophecy that was brought to the church in the weeks before the last nativity, that the church, that as a church, we were about to walk off the map. We had prepared ourselves, we were well equipped, we were pulling together everyone's gifts, and we were about to step into uncharted territory. And we certainly did that. But now we find ourselves in that territory that's already been mapped. What do we do? Do we remain there, or do we retreat back to safe, comfortable ground? Or do we push on and keep walking off the map, using those gifts that God has added to the ones that He gave us to use before? Over the 16 months since the 2019 Nativity, it's become very clear to us as an eldership team that it's absolutely the right thing to do the Nativity again. Now, there are some reasons why we believe it's right for us to plan again. First reason was that He first called us, and He calls us to participate in the calling of others. He's given us the gifts to be able to put on the Nativity, and has developed and given us many new gifts for us to use, not to hide away. The ground was prepared and will be again through the Nativity production for the seeds of the gospel to grow and develop. The prophecy given was that not that we walk off the map and then remain in a place of safety and comfort, but we continue to do that and keep charting new territory. Next, the more recent prophecy about the church putting out lifeboats is also a part of this. And as Rob put it last week, every time we share a testimony or share the gospel with people, it's like reaching out hand from the lifeboat and giving the opportunity for somebody to be saved. And finally, the nativity has not to be our only seed sowing opportunity, but there should be and will be other ways that we get opportunity to sow the seeds of the gospel into people's lives. So before I finish, I just want to give a bit of a brief outline of how this year's nativity will look or may look. It's still in the planning stages as yet. But we're very aware of the world that we currently live in. And although things are beginning to be relaxed at the moment, we don't know where or what that's going to look like come December. So we're mindful of that, and to plan a nativity where we gather 120 or 30 people together for each showing's probably not terribly wise at this stage. So we're changing things around, and we're going to do much more of a walkthrough type nativity. We're going to bring groups of people in 12 to 15 people at a time, and they're going to be accompanied by someone that will go around with them. And there'll be 7, I think, different sets located around the farm, and we'll have the person that guides them around will also engage into the production, but will also draw the people that they're taking round into kind of taking part a little bit as well, and engage with them and build a rapport with them as they're going around. So that enables us to really keep the groups to a kind of a minimum. It's going to be really difficult to obviously do a bespoke gospel preach, so we're going to be looking at how we do that within the time that they're going around, and how we bring the gospel out very clearly through the individual sets and the production as people go. So we'll also be doing some follow-up. We'll encourage people to come along to, hopefully we'll be able to do some kind of carol service at that stage. It also will be planning on doing an alpha course again in the new year, fairly soon after the nativity. we'd like to get as many people as possible from the church to get involved in all the different aspects that we will need to put this on. But we also like to reach out into the community of people around us, our friends and relatives, and really give them opportunity to be built in to relationship with us. And that gives us another opportunity really to sow the seeds of the gospel in the actual putting this on. It gives us opportunity to get to know other people's friends, and it gives them opportunity to get to know people that I know, and it's really it's just a second string really to be able to share the gospel into more people. Yeah, I've got the dates, but now I'm trying to figure out what they were. It's the middle weekend in December, and I can't for the life of me remember what those dates were. Maybe Jane would like to put in the chat what they were. I think it's possibly the 13th or 14th of December, but I'm not 100% sure. But if she doesn't put it up,
it's the 11th and 12th of December.
Right, sorry. Did you want to say that again without me talking?
11th and 12th of December.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, if anyone wants to get involved, drop me a message.
That was exactly what I was about to say. If anybody does want to get involved, yeah. Jane's coordinating things. There'll be lots of opportunity to help. We're going to need a few more costumes making. Most of what we have we'll be able to use again, but we've got some of the sets will be doubling up. Things like Mary and Joseph are going to have to appear by multiple people in multiple areas. So we need more for those. They'll be helping set up the sets. They'll be being part of the production itself, helping on the day, stewarding, being hosts, taking people around. There's lots and lots of different aspects that people can get involved in. So we've already got a core team that's beginning to put things together. The script is being written as we speak, and I'm sure it will be as fantastic as it was last time, albeit very different. So I think I've probably talked enough, to be quite honest. Yeah, feel free to give Jane or me a bell and volunteer to do anything. That would be great. Okay, back to you, Dave.